Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kumar Datatran with Agile Meridian. Actually, it may not be afternoon wherever you're watching, so it could be morning, could be evening. Wherever you are, hello, and welcome to another episode of Agile Shorts. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the hero team member, that person who does everything, who is sort of the Swiss Army knife of the team and is indispensable to the working of the team. And in some cases, in many cases, can cause a lot of dysfunction in the team, right? Because again, they do everything. They're so relied upon. They're sort of the hero. They come in and swoop in and save the day, right? So how do you deal with that hero team member? Chris, do you have any stories to share or any advice to give our audience?
Sure. So I think we've all experienced a hero somewhere along the way, right? I mean, we've all experienced the person who comes along and saves the day miraculously. And when we were prepping for this session, Kumar, I was thinking about an experience I had where I was working for a not-for-profit, and we had a bunch of interfaces that came in. And we developed controllers, little modules to sit there and take the data and then transform it, because everybody brought their data in differently. So it transformed it into our standard format. And the guy that I had that wrote that module and then was responsible for it, it seemed like every 2 or 3 weeks he would come in and go, "Yay, I fixed the problem. I have saved this particular customer." And it happened once, and hey, thanks for that. I really appreciate you going out on a limb there and taking care of that, and taking the initiative, right? And then as he kept coming back to me, it's like, wait a minute. Didn't you write the code? Shouldn't you be fixing the code? And as I pressed him on it, what we started to uncover was he really wanted to be acknowledged for something. And he really got excited about the high fives that come along from being the guy that helps the client. Mm-hmm. But yet he never went and solved the problem. I mean, he owned the problem and never solved it. He never fixed it. So every time it happened, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy for him, right? I want to be the hero. Hence, this thing breaks all the time, and I get to fix it. And it was pretty interesting when I started dealing with it and pointing it out. All of a sudden, it was pretty interesting to watch the leadership of the organization suddenly change, and this individual they thought was critical, suddenly other cracks started to show in what he was doing. And it was a pretty interesting experience.
So what you're saying is when you have this sort of hero syndrome, it's useful to sort of dig underneath the surface. What's the problem that's enabling the behavior? And in the case of in the story that you just shared, the person didn't really engineer the solution all that well, and so had to constantly fix it. And of course, got a lot of accolades for doing so. And not only did he get those accolades, but he also wasn't sort of sharing that knowledge with anyone else on the team where they could fix it, right?
Right.
But most importantly, they weren't fixing the underlying issue, which was that component had a flaw in it. It was poorly designed, whatever, and they weren't fixing that root cause. What are some other sort of root causes you think that lead to the hero complex?
Well, skills obviously is one, right? Maybe there's only one person that has the skill. It could be if you're talking about project kind of work, it could be that. It could be poor project planning, could be unrealistic estimations, right? Oh, we're behind. We don't have enough hours for this. I need you to work overtime. Somebody comes in and works overtime. It could be procrastination on their part. I mean, I've had folks who have, when developing software, in the good old days, they'd have 2 or 3 months to build this big, massive program. And they'd kind of take it easy for the first 2.5 months, and then they'd work overtime and weekends and all this to get it done. And it's, they could have, instead of doing it all at the end, they could have spread it out, right? And the organization's like, oh, these guys are great. They go over. Look how dedicated they are. They work overtime. And,
I think,
in
yeah, I
reality,
was
they
just going
control
to,
their own destiny, right? I mean,
yeah, I think you hit upon one of those root causes, right? And that is the reward model in the company, right? So if you reward certain behaviors, then of course people are going to want to get some of those accolades and get the recognition. And so if, working over the weekend or working at night is rewarded, oh, you're a hard worker, you're gonna be expected to do more of that.
right.
And rather than fix the underlying issue, which is maybe, poorly designed code or poor collaboration on the team or a lack of team norms or boundaries and expectations of what you need to be as a team member. All of these things are so important, right? Setting boundaries and expectations for every team member on the team. What's expected of each person on the team. How do you work together? How do you collaborate together? And having team members hold each other accountable, right? So, I would think that on a high performing team, you don't have heroes, right? At least
Right.
in my experience, I've seen that, in a high performing team, everyone is collaborating, everyone has each other's back. On a team with a hero, that's not the case. It's pretty dysfunctional.
Right.
So if you're leading a team with a hero, how would you change that behavior? What are some things that you've done?
Tried to, some things I've done. Pairing is one example, right? So I paired somebody up with that individual. I've justified it by, if you get, if you get hit by a bus speech, right? If you get hit by a bus and you're the only one who has the knowledge, Mr. Hero or Ms. Hero, right? Then we're stuck. And so pairing somebody up is one thing I've done. Trying to be more open, trying to get more transparency into what people do. And of course, it's called an agile short, but agile really helps that, right? If you're trying to get transparency into what people are doing every day, how they're doing it, not micromanaging, of course, but just trying to get it out and open. Retrospectives really work well. The other thing that when I say retrospectives, I don't mean at a team level, but at a situation level, right? So we got in this situation, so let's go through and do an analysis, a root cause analysis to understand what went wrong and why, how do we avoid this happening again? And, using something like the 5 whys or a fishbone diagram and facilitating the team through it. And what you start to uncover what those things are, right? But it's always about trying to get to understand, in my experience, trying to understand what that root cause is, and then letting the others on the team figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, I exactly. I totally agree. And I think for the hero, it's, I say encouraging them to lead. And I don't mean that by continuing the behavior that's gotten them as far as they have, but by truly leading, right? To showing others, to your point, the pairing, by showing others what they know and how to fix these types of issues and encouraging them to build their leadership skills so that they can support their teammates, right? Rather than look for those accolades. It's also important, I think, in my mind, to acknowledge the hero, right? Because they do bring some deep skill and expertise that the team either hasn't had a chance to develop or that they just truly lack. And so it's important to acknowledge them, the hero, but at the same time, doing all the other things that we talked about, right? Making sure that boundaries and expectations are clear for every member of the team, how they will collaborate, how they will work. The pairing, the agile ceremonies help with that. you know, either creating or revisiting team norms. You know, if you have a situation where the team is dysfunctional, and one of the best things that you can do from an Agile perspective is to revisit your team norms, your team charter. And if you don't have one, by all means, create one, so everyone's on the same page and in alignment as to how to behave, how to operate. So then, Chris, I think the elephant in the room question is, you know, we have a couple of viewers, and certainly please, you know, send us your questions. But the burning question is, if I'm a member of the team, I'm not a leader on the team. I can't influence the behavior of a team member quite so easily as if I'm a leader of the team. But if I'm a member, I'm sort of the recipient of this behavior, where there's Susie over there getting all the credit again, doing all the work, and I'm going to check out, right? So what would you say to me to do? How can you help? How can I survive this hero complex and change it through influence? Because clearly I'm not a leader. I'm not a leader of the team. What would you say to me?
I would encourage I'm a believer in powerful questions. So I would encourage somebody who's a member of a team to ask questions about, to ask questions about why we're there, what's going on, to ask questions about, what can we do about training? And getting people skilled up if that's the issue. Those are the kind of things that, and I know I sound like I'm a one-trick pony here, but just trying to, I can't emphasize enough that you got to get to that root cause. And so, as a team member, asking questions, right, about how, what's the norm? What do we expect? What kind of response do we expect out of us, right? Steve, let's say Steve's the hero. Steve went and did this great thing. What can I do to help Steve, right? You take that empathetic kind of approach about, I'm trying to help you, right? Help Steve so he doesn't have to be the hero, so we don't get in that situation. And I think that breaks down, I think you can break down barriers, a lot of barriers that way, right? And disarm people to get them to talk about it. But you need to figure out a way to facilitate that conversation and facilitate the conversation within the team. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are sort of the basics. I think the minimum. However, I think that in some places the culture is so toxic and dysfunctional that, it'd be hard for that team member to muster up the courage to ask any questions at all, right? And I think that, in those situations, it's up to, I hate to say this, but it's really up to the leaders of the team, of the group, whatever you want to call it, to be more empathetic and aware of the dynamics, right? And to do something about it, right? So if one person is the loudest voice in the room consistently, if it's always Steve or always Susie who's talking in meetings, in your agile team, right, then you don't really have an agile team. You have a very inflexible team, a very rigid team that's sort of run by this hero. And they're not going to be adaptable. They're not going to be able to change with changing requirements, with things that come up, because the rest of the teammate is disengaged. Their morale is low, and likely you suffer from high turnover. So a clear sign that you have a hero is when one or two people dominate conversations in meetings. And so if I'm an observer, and we all are as coaches, and I see that, my first instinct is to ask the other people on the team, hey, how are you doing? What's it like working here? What would you like to do differently? And you don't have to be an outsider or a coach to ask those questions. As a leader, you should be asking those questions anyway of your team. And all I would say is that if you are on a team like this, where it's kind of dysfunctional, then you'd be surprised, just by talking to the hero and asking those questions, you do have a lot of influence. You can change the culture just by being empathetic and asking powerful questions. It's a tall ask, but it can be done. So I agree
Right.
with you there.
Yep. And if that doesn't work, then what other option do you have? If you're really in a toxic culture,
I mean, you can certainly go up the chain, right? If talking to the hero doesn't change the behavior, then you can talk to your manager, and if that doesn't work, then unfortunately you're left with few options, right? So you can either be an order taker and just do the work that you're given and be quiet, and if that's not fulfilling enough, for most people it isn't. I would leave. Honestly, I wouldn't stay in a situation like that. And in this day and age, where companies are fighting for good talent, it's not hard to understand why people are leaving at the rates that they're leaving, right? Because the engagement's poor, the morale's low. There's so many reasons to leave and look for greener pastures elsewhere. So for all of you who are listening now and who hopefully will be listening in the future to this broadcast, if you're leading a team, if you're influencing a team, watch out for those signs of disengagement. One or two people talking, right? And everyone else quiet. That is a clear sign that you have a hero or someone that's going to be a hero pretty soon.
do you? I want to go back to something you said, and that is that earlier that you said you made a comment about high performing teams, right? And you don't have a hero. Why do you think? Why do you think high performing teams don't have a hero? I'd like to talk about that a minute or two.
Yeah, I think with high performing teams, the collective intelligence is much greater than the intelligence of one member of the team, right?
Right.
In dysfunctional teams, you could have a bunch of geniuses on the team, but if they're dysfunctional, the collective IQ of that team is probably 80 because they don't work well together, right? They don't talk to each other. They're not aligned. They don't back each other up. They're looking for attention. They're looking to be that hero. On a high performing team, you can have a bunch of average people, 110 IQ, but they perform like they have an IQ of 130. It's a sort of they multiply each other's abilities because they're
Right.
helping each other out, right? And so with high performing teams, you see more equal conversations, more collaboration, more conflict. You see more conflict with high performing teams. And I mean good conflict where they're engaging in ideas, they're innovating, they're thinking of alternative scenarios. You might even see some heated debates about what the best way is to do something. And then the leader's job is really to moderate those conversations so that they don't get too heated, right? But
Yeah.
that's a good problem to have.
Right. It is a good problem to have. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I see the difference between high performing teams and dysfunctional groups of people. And I wouldn't want to call a group of people that's dysfunctional a team because they really aren't. They're not a team. They've been artificially put together in this grouping, and they work together. They
Have
attend the
you
same
ever?
ceremonies.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Have you ever extracted a hero from a team to see what it would do? Just
I
listening to you,
have.
I think that would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I have. Back in when I was leading teams, wasn't when I was working in a company and I was a leader myself. I had the unpleasant task of having to do just that, right? So remove the person that was had the hero complex. And what happened with the rest of the team was really interesting because they went through a period where their performance dipped, obviously, right? The hero's gone. Now they have to figure out all the things that the hero did and all the things that he knew and had to do it on their own, basically. But what ended up happening was pretty amazing, because that team, they ended up becoming higher performing than they were before. They actually became a team,
Yep.
right? They started performing much better than, within it took a few months, because they had to learn a lot. And the person that was removed was, absolutely knew so much. He knew where every skeleton was buried, right? And so they had to learn, basically. But in a few months, they were performing just as well as they were before. And the thing is that a few months more time that passed, they were way better than they were. I mean, they were coming up with really innovative ideas. Everyone on the team had brought their own unique mix of skills and experience to the table, and they were much, much, much more collaborative than they'd ever been before. And isn't that a team we'd all want to, be a part of?
Yeah, I've done that before. I've pulled heroes out, and it's always interesting because exactly what you describe happens.
Yeah.
The team starts out and it kind of dips a little bit, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden they just start spurting, and they end up doing a better job, and they're happier because the hero's gone. And I've tried that. I've tried to push that a couple times, and I get the pushback from leaders about, well, we're too busy. We've got this big release coming up, and this da 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 da. It's too important. We can't disrupt anything. It's like, sometimes you can disrupt something for a short period of time and end up miles ahead. If you just have the courage to go do that.
Yeah, that's probably a topic for another Agile Short, and that is the sort of the forming teams using the open space agility method, right? So letting teams form themselves and reform themselves when conditions are needed. So maybe we'll visit that as a topic at some point. Any closing thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, we need to get some managers into that meeting, into that Agile Short, so we can get some interesting comments, because that certainly would upset their world.
Yeah.
I think that I've enjoyed the conversation. I really think this is an important topic that a lot of people don't have an opportunity to discuss, but yet almost all of us have experienced it, if not once, multiple times in our careers. So.
No, I agree. And this is, directly inspired by our experiences with our clients. We see it, we feel it, and we try to help. And hopefully this video, will be watched by people. I'm sure it'll resonate and give you some ideas on how to deal with it, especially if you're part of a team and you have just influence and no power to change it. Just know that influence is a powerful thing.
Right.
Sometimes more powerful than power and position and title. And so use it wisely, ask powerful questions, and we hope to see you in our next Agile Short. There is a comment.
Yep.
Just saying that just dropped in to see how it's going. Have to drop, catch up later. All right, well, no problem. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in a couple of weeks for our next Agile Short. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Chris.
Bye-bye.